Like the Real Housewives of Max Verstappen up in here.
Checo's checked out.
Joe Guanyu is off the track. That steak is cooked.
I gotta say, a lot is at stake for Steak F1.
Man, even the broadcast couldn't handle that stat.
My heart almost was screaming like, how can anybody be a Lewis Hamilton fan?
No.
Not on my 2024 bingo card.
Yeah, you're gonna have to create a new one now.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Lights Out Latest. My name is Rena. I'm here with Jason and Steven. Unfortunately, Tristan couldn't make it. He is out having a great time camping. He will be back next pod. Don't you guys worry. It was an amazing race weekend. It was really, really hectic. Talking points all around. Quali, even some free practice talking points. The race, everything. But before we get into that, breaking news for the week. HAAS did announce their lineup to be for next year. Kmag announced, part of their lineup. We know that Ollie, they confirmed Ollie a couple weeks ago. Now Kmag confirmed not to be driving, and a lot of rumors saying that Esteban's going to be going to the team. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, it's an interesting move. We've been talking about Kmag going to Audi in 2026, 2025 season here. So kind of expected. Good for him. It could be interesting to see what he's going to do with his next team. But, of course, I think the big news here is, of course, Ollie Behrman coming into HAAS, and then Esteban Ocon being his first teammate in F1. So he's going to have some tough skin there. And, I think if he can deal with Esteban Ocon as a teammate, as his first teammate, I think that'll go a long way. So, I mean, we'll see.
He's definitely not a guy who's going to help his teammates as we've seen. Obviously, I think you meant Nico to Audi because K-Mag's out right now. I bet he's going to go back to sports car, IndyCar or something like he did after 2020. But really, Ollie, he's going to be the replacement for Lewis Hamilton. Like, he's the next, like, Charles Leclerc level kind of deal Ferrari hopes he is. So we'll see it. But all I think of Esteban is all the crashes he had with Perez at Force India, all the battles he had with his previous teammates at Renault and Alpine. Obviously, he has a win. He just got that new car in his house shipped from Alpine from his win in Hungary a couple years ago. So that's pretty cool. But he has the pace. So as like a Haas Ferrari fan, I'm not too concerned about Ocon being there. As long as Ollie can hold his own, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. My only thing is that I feel like, first of all, this is Esteban's like ninth life. When he was announced he was leaving Alpine, I really thought this was the end of the road, Formula One wise, for Esteban. I feel like there wasn't nowhere did it cross my mind Esteban could be going to Haas, ever. And even there were some rumors earlier in the week that were saying that there was actually potential for Esteban to go to Williams mid-season to replace Logan Sargent, which is crazy. There was no way, nothing in my mind led to Esteban having another chance and another seat because of all of the history that you just talked about of him crashing with teammates, especially it has with Ollie Behrman being a rookie driver. We've seen rookies come in and do spectacularly like Oscar Piastri or not so well like Logan, who's had a lot of crashes, Nick DeFries, a lot of crashing and stuff. And I feel like in that scenario, when you have a rookie coming into the sport, you want someone to nurture them a little bit, not like they're babies and they haven't been driving for forever, but someone who can show them the ropes, someone who's really good at setting up the car so that there can be a little bit less pressure on the rookie to do that part on his side of the garage. So I don't know, it's just a little weird for me. And I don't know if it fits, I feel like the teammate lineup wouldn't make sense in my opinion, but again, it's not confirmed. So it could just be a rumor. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this before that I don't think it's an issue with Haas choosing the wrong driver. It's more like no other driver would choose to race their Haas. You have Bottas on the market, but he doesn't want to go to Haas. He's probably going Williams. You also have Sainz on the market. He has his pick from almost anywhere. I think only Mercedes explicitly said we won't want Sainz. We want somebody young like Kimi Antonelli. Shout out for him. He won F2 this week. So, I mean, even Ocon, he was a Mercedes driver for a little bit. He was a reserve driver. He has had such a weird career going from Manor, and the Manor team went bankrupt. And then he sat as a Mercedes reserve driver after Force India in 2019. I thought his career was over after then, but so many drivers sit year out and then come back even stronger.
Yeah.
Ocon arguably did, or Hulkenberg definitely did. Like he
Yeah,
totally resurrected his career out of nowhere. Total shocked
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yeah.
I who knows? He definitely has some speed, Ocon. It just like you said, who knows how he'll do with a rookie teammate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I was just thinking about, could we imagine a world where Andretti buys out Haas?
I
And that-
wish.
I mean, I feel like that would be
They'll
cool.
buy Alpine before Haas.
Yeah, I don't think Gene Haas is like even willing to sell. I think they've had a lot of hardship over there and they've had a lot of issues money wise and stuff, but I think they're finally on track. I think they're getting more sponsorships. They have a team that's working to do with partnerships and stuff, but also they're finally striking performance. And I think the crucial moves, as much as I love Gunther Steiner, I love him. The moves they made last year in terms of bringing upgrades, where they would kind of hold off to bring a major upgrade, but by then everyone else has brought little upgrades that's already improved their performance, so you wouldn't see that massive gain on track for like a continued period of time. It'd be like one race, 2 races maybe, and then people would bring more upgrades. And what they did this year was bring continuous little upgrades, which is helping them kind of break with a midfield that's so tight. It's helping them break into the points. So I don't see a world where now is the time they sell. You know, a couple years ago when they were really struggling to get any points at all, then maybe. But at this point, like, I just don't see them selling.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing is too, actually, I was just thinking about how, I don't know if you guys knew, the Stuart Haas NASCAR team, they just actually are, I don't know if you'd say folding, but they're kind of, I guess you could say, retiring from the series. So that would actually help Haas a lot, I think. Taking a lot of those resources from NASCAR, then probably putting them back into F1. I think they're going to put
I think they're keeping their junior series team there. The
Xfinity
cars.
I was going to say, yeah, they're going to field, I think, 1 or 2 cars, but definitely not as many and as big of an operation as they used to. So, I mean, that could help.
Also, the new Toyota stuff. There's rumors Toyota's going to come in, help out Haas. Obviously, they used to be huge presence in Formula One. They're nominating, have been battling, I would say, recently in Le Mans series. They've been all over other types of motorsports. They're in drag racing. They are in GT3 cars with the Supra. They're in NASCAR with the NASCAR Supra and Xfinity. And I think the Camry and the Cup Series. So Toyota's everywhere in racing except for F1 right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if the rumors are true. They still have F1 level equipment in Cologne, Germany. McLaren used all those facilities and wind tunnels up until they built their own a couple years ago. So they're F1 caliber. I wouldn't be surprised if they came in with Haas over the next couple years, especially for new engine regs.
Yeah, I think
that'd be awesome
because we've seen so many manufacturers wanting to get into F1. I think it just proves how far the sport has come in terms of audience. With Liberty Media, and a lot of people talk about like not liking really Drive to Survive because of how dramatic it is, and people hate on like the opening ceremonies in Vegas and stuff like that because it does add this like show element to what is just it's a sport, right? Like it's for our entertainment, but at the end of the day, it's a sport, and these guys take it very seriously. And when you make it like you add these kind of things, it kind of makes it kind of like a joke. It kind of degrades it a little bit. But nonetheless, the audience is gaining and gaining and gaining. And then you see it in manufacturers wanting to get either into the sport or back into the sport, like Andretti, like Toyota, all these teams that, I think we've heard GNC and stuff like that wanting to get back in. So we'll see how that comes. But I think it's interesting. Let's move into quali and the race weekend, because the headline I have for Q1 is Checo checked out again.
That was just new, man.
This conversation, because I feel like it's every single week now. I think the stats are like, I remember seeing a meme right before quali that was, it was like Logan Sargent said, "Call me 007, 0 poles, 0 wins, 7 times out-qualified Checo." Well, now it's
I saw that.
So I don't, it's crazy to me.
I definitely feel like Christian Horner has his interview on a recording that says, "Oh yeah, great job for Max. Checo needs a big race tomorrow. Obviously bad qualifying, but points are on Sunday. He just has that on loop. Like anytime he has our interview, he just sends him that video from like the media trailer or something.
Oh my
It's the same story
gosh.
every week. And as we'll get to it, he's fallen another place in the driver's standings to Lewis Hamilton. His teammate outscored him again. And again, he had to fault for a recovery drive. I mean, it was, and you could kind of expand on this, that it was mixed conditions. You know, any driver in mixed conditions pushing that hard, you know, there's going to be at some point where there's a puddle on the track you don't see and they throw it in the wall. Every single driver has done that in mixed conditions before. But it just compounds week on week on week that he keeps doing this, where he keeps crashing or losing points or getting out qualifying, especially in the rain. And you can't fight for titles with that kind of driver. And he started out the season so well, but it's kind of disappointing to see this might be his last few races with the team.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I think the problem is, again, it just keeps on happening, and I think this is one, unfortunately, I would look at. I think to your point, Jason, this wasn't necessarily his fault, but again, it's just the context in which it's happening. It's happening week after week after week. And then I wonder if y'all saw this too. I just remembered I saw this quote. He was saying, I think a lot of guys will call it quits by now, or people will have retired. But this is just like, you know, I want to keep going to set that precedent for my kids. I'm like, you know, that's great. But at the same time, this feels like almost like a situation where you would rather leave before you get fired type of situation. You know what I mean? It's not a good look. But I respect it, but no, this ain't the way to go about it.
I can see that, you know, obviously the mixed conditions doesn't make it easy, but at the end of the day, it's still a driver error. And when you have a driver error on top of so many driver errors, I think he's one of the biggest talking points of the year, because we'll get into it more with race and stuff, but Max is constantly fighting solo. And when you look at, you know, Sky Sports will put up on their feed like the stats for like points scored in the last 6 races by constructors. Red Bull is consistently 3rd, 4th. McLaren and Mercedes are outscoring them every weekend because they're fighting with 2 people, with 2 drivers. And Max, he can push as hard as he's capable of, but the car is not as good as it used to be, and he's fighting solo. So when it comes to strategy, the other teams have so many more options where they can undercut with one car and overcut with the other car and hope that one of them works out or whatever. So I just don't get why he's still there. Honestly, I don't get why he's still there. And I understand, we talked about the performance clause, so I'm honestly really, really hoping that they do choose to take that, because like you said, he dropped 6 places behind Max in constructors, and he's over 100 points behind Max. So they're well within their right to get rid of him, honestly.
Yeah.
But there's no obvious step of who's next. Like, is it going to be Sainz? I want it to be Sainz. Everybody says it's going to be Ricardo. Why do you have Tsunoda still sitting there? It's even Lawson comes into play, but I don't think he's going to go straight to the top team.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because Liam Lawson, I feel like they won't make the same mistake they made with Pierre and Alex of bringing a driver of Liam's caliber straight to the main team. So that kind of eliminates him. On the other hand, I thought it was funny. I don't know if you guys caught this, but right after Checo crashes, Danny goes P1.
Yep.
That
was epic.
It was hilarious. It was epic. Everybody's tweeting about it and whatnot. But he's the only person I can see there because of the way Max is and the way Yuki is, because I think they're 2 hotheads, and I don't think you can have 2 hotheads on the same team. I think that would only end in issue. I talked about it when Checo originally signed his contract. I was like, maybe they're just trying to make Max happy. At the end of the day, he's just not interfering with Max's race, and he's not causing issues with Max. But now he's causing issues with upgrades because he has so much crash damage, and which, you know, in the cost cap era, you can't just crash, and then still bring upgrades. It's kind of impossible. So
it's like now Perez. I think before, you know, Max was able to get away with it, and the fact that Checo was just being Checo, and now Checo is actually messing with Max's car inadvertently.
Yeah.
So now Max is real pissed about it, I'm sure, and I think that's probably the big reason why he was so mad during the race. But I also think that, I think to your point with Yuki, you can't put Yuki in that seat. I think he will probably cause more problems. I mean, of course, I think he would probably be about the same maybe a little slower than Checo, I feel like. But at the same time, also, it's you think about it, it's like, well, I think we talked about before where Carlos is the huge domino to fall here.
Yeah.
Once he decides if he's going to go to Red Bull or Mercedes or wherever he decides to go, because I think ideally you would want him on Red Bull, but I think if you're Carlos, I think the way that Red Bull has been falling, the way that Mercedes has been rising, I think Mercedes is the more attractive role right now for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any driver announcements are going to be made really until Sainz decides where he gets to go. Like Haas has 2 seats available for next year. They announced one, but they're waiting on other. Like, what if things don't work out and Sainz calls up Haas and is like, "Hey, yeah, sure, I'll take the seat for a year or something." He's really the first domino to fall, and nothing's happening yet. But hasn't Toto said that he wouldn't want an older driver like Sainz unless they're literally like the best of the best? Like he said, like, I want Max Verstappen. Like after Max was so angry, Toto's like knocking on his door in the motorhome, like sending him letters, finding out his fax machine, like send him faxes, like thinking about new car. Like he's definitely pulling all the stops for Max right now.
Absolutely.
Man,
I mean, the news with all of the CrowdStrike, Microsoft issues, and then being like, "Oh my God, Toto's not gonna be able to contact Max or whatever." So funny. Like you said, I think that there's this big thing, less with Mercedes as a team, but more with Toto Wolff himself having big regrets of not being able to sign Max Verstappen all the way back in 2015, because like we've talked about, Red Bull has the 2 teams, right? They have Red Bull and they have VCarb or AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso as it was at the time. But Mercedes just has that one team, and they had a strong lineup at the time, so they weren't willing to put Max in the F1 seat. And so Max took an F1 seat with Toro Rosso, with Red Bull, and it's led to this great legacy. I mean, he's still technically, obviously he's not been as strong as the McLarens and Mercedes and Lando and whatnot, but he's still on course for a 4th consecutive title. Even if Red Bull doesn't take the constructors, they're still on course for the drivers. So you want Max, right? Like you have these big regrets of not being able to sign him back then, but then also Kimi Antonelli is being talked about as the next Max Verstappen. So then you want Kimi, but you put him straight into Mercedes when he's so young and he just had 1 season in F2. So I don't know. It's so tough now because when Mercedes was, for lack of a better word, they were crap. There was no harm in putting in Kimi Antonelli because even if he crashes, you're on the fringes of the points, kind of 6th-ish. So it's not going to be this huge detriment if he's not being able to score points or not finishing races. But now that they're actually good, you want someone who's going to be able to consistently fight for the podium like Lewis has been and George has been. So
yeah. Well, the other thing is, too, I think I remember seeing a quote that Kimi was saying he's not ready to go into F1 right now. So I think there's that, but then also, I get the whole thing. I will say this also, the whole Max Verstappen love affair with Toto Wolff needs to be studied. Like that needs to be its own its own thing right there. Like my gosh, I mean, you said it. It's been 2015. It's been damn near 10 years. This has been going on. I mean, right now it's like, man, Max is the one that got away, I guess, but.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Lewis leaving the team was like the little thing that was able to kick Toto Wolff out of his because obviously we were never going to see Max and Lewis as teammates. I don't think we ever will. Ever.
Yeah, no.
So I think Lewis being at the team was that one thing stopping Toto Wolff from being able to pursue Max Verstappen at any point. And so now that Lewis is leaving the team, I'm sure his first call all the way back in February was, "Hey Max, what are you doing? What are you doing next year?" So
hey babes, it's Toto. The time has come.
Speaking of Toto, back to Q1, George was complaining. Kind of, he put a lot of blame on himself, but also complaining about the team because he did make a mistake on his first lap of the second run of Q1. And he aborted the lap and started again, but he wasn't fueled to do enough laps all the way to the end of the session. So he was like, "Guys, come on, what are we doing?"
Yeah.
I just don't know how you do that. Like, why? What's the point? And I know it's kilos and it makes the car a little bit slower, but ideally you want to be able to run to the end of session, especially in a session with rain potentially coming.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I totally get it. The whole idea of, less gas, faster car, but I don't. It's so tough because I do know that F1 cars, they're run at such a fine margin and there's a very, very, very small margin for error. So I mean, I get it. I really do. The less, like I said, the less gas the car, the faster the car is going to be. So you're trying to put as much gas as you possibly need for that that little bit of time you have to do those quality laps. And yeah, unfortunately you make one mistake and that just throws everything off. And again, it's no bash against George or anything like that, but it's just a shame because just one mistake like that ruins your qualifying, and then you're at Q2,
a little bit,
Q1
actually. A little bit on the team here, but George, he had to make that one lap, and you'd think a team like Mercedes, who's finishing in the top 5, for the past 2 races, you'd think they'd just put in one lap and be okay. But with changeable conditions, who knows? So a little bit on the team. George had to step out of the car early because of that.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot of...
Hey, at least he started next to Checo like he usually does, right?
Yeah. He's got some favorable company.
He saw a Red Bull next to him. He must have been comfortable on the grid.
Yeah.
Who the heck are these other guys?
This reminds me a lot of back.
He doesn't know what a Sauber is. He's like saying that, like, what's the highlighter next to me? What?
Toto, I'm scared. Take me back home.
It reminds me so much.
Oh man.
Was when Red Bull was knocked out. I want to say it was like Singapore when Max had to come in. He wasn't able to finish the lap, and they go box a slap. He's like, "What are you talking about? I'm on a fast lap. Like, why am I boxing?" They're like, "There's not enough fuel because you have to give full fuel samples, so they wouldn't have had enough to finish the fast lap, do another cool lap, and come into the pits." So just a team error on that one. Driver error though again Q3 with Yuki crashing. It was just a terrible thing. For Red Bull as a I guess not even a team, but as like a company, like
organization. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know. It was just
that was not a pretty one for Yuki either. Out of
all the Red Bull team drivers, I think Ricciardo had the best weekend. And he's saying, he's like, when asked if he has a shot at Red Bull, he's like, I haven't been contacted, but I'm pushing every race. Got a couple more races till the summer break, and he's been doing fine. He hasn't been anything crazy, but he's been doing pretty good. I keep him on the radar.
That is the one thing I will say, having thought about it. I think it's been pretty rare that Ricciardo crashes. I mean, he has bad races, and he's decent in races, but he doesn't wreck the car, so that's always a plus, He's gonna have that over Checo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what we were talking about, right? Like before, when Checo's contract was originally signed, obviously there were a lot of people not happy about it. Myself, Red Bull, and Max fan, not one of them. Like I just not happy about it. But at the same time, I mean, if anybody saw my Fun Fact Friday, I talked about there are advantages. I mean, Checo brings a lot of money to the team. And he wasn't, at the time at least, he wasn't crashing all that much. I think he had one crash in the season by then. Granted, it was a big one at Monaco, but it was the one time. His qualifyings weren't great, and therefore his races weren't spectacular, but he had those so many the second place finishes at the beginning of the year, which fine. But now that he's crashing all the time, I feel like it'd be worth the risk to switch him or get rid of him and put in Ricciardo. Because, like you said, Ricciardo's not crashing. So, at the very least, you're going to get a driver who's going to fight for points and not going to crash. So...
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, I mean, you brought up the money thing. I think Danny Rick would definitely eclipse Perez in the money that he brought in. I mean, I think Ricciardo is arguably the most loved, especially, I would say now he probably is the most loved driver in the sport right now. And so having that image, I mean, just thinking about it, Max and Danny Rick, I mean, that's just a dream scenario to me. And I mean, of course, I just feel like
energy.
Yeah. And, then Christian Horner will have his guy back, and I don't know, I'll be hunky-dory, I guess. But
I remember the interviews after he left in 2018, like Christian gave. He is like, I couldn't believe Daniel left. I thought we had him locked up. I loved him. We were an up and coming team.
Yeah.
And Ricardo looks back and says, yeah, that was a career mistake. I was just too lost. I was too blinded thinking they're only going to focus on Max. I mean, obviously they would, but they ended up being the better team, and it almost killed Daniel's career after that.
Yeah.
He's definitely one of Horner's guys, and Max is more of one of Marco's guys. So it's been kind of tense. I won't be shocked if he would come back.
Yeah. It would be so awesome, especially in the new cars. It'd be like a new chapter in the story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
The drivers
awesome.
we've been talking about, like Nico, Esteban, everybody that's kind of, been a big talking point this year are drivers that have at some point left the sport and come back. Even Alex, who drove so well last year. Car's been really difficult this year, but he's still driving very well. Everybody was talking about these drivers that are getting a second wind. On one hand, I love it. I love that they're getting another chance and they're proving themselves, and it's great. On the other hand, it's been so difficult for young talent, for F2 champions like Felipe Drukovic, who's been out of the sport, out of the formulas, for what, 2 years now, 3 years? I don't know. It's been a while. And then last year's champion, Teo Porcher, like, they're just not getting their chances because these guys are getting a second chance. And ultimately, teams want experience and they want people that aren't going to crash. So I don't know.
Speaking of Porcher, he's been over in IndyCar. Let me get on my McLaren thinking cap here, because they've been having a ton of drama. I need to tape this on because I'm running on HAAS's budget. So basically, what's been happening is Theo Porcher was called in to replace a driver who broke his wrist, and he's been in IndyCar for this half a season. And the geniuses at McLaren, because apparently they're running out of money too, which I don't know how, with Zach having every sponsor sticker on his shirt, just dropped him and threw in this guy who is essentially a rookie pay driver. And then another one of their drivers broke their hand, and Porcher was called back. So anyways, I'm supremely disappointed that Porcher hasn't had more of a chance in F1, but at the same time, his IndyCar career is getting messed up by pay drivers, just like Daniel Ricciardo's is by Perez. So I'm sorry, that's my McLaren opinion, and there's many more McLaren opinions to come.
You can keep your McLaren hat on. We talk about McLaren's 1-2, both in quali and then in the race. Youngest ever 1-2 in F1 history. On top of that, McLaren's first 1-2 since 2012. So it's crazy.
Since Danny Rick.
Yeah. Who was the 1-2?
Right?
Say it was.
Finishing position was Danny Rick in Monza, and then in qualifying, first 1-2 since 2012.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I honestly, I was expecting it though, and even though, I feel like it's because we're talking about it, and people were talking about how bad Max's weekend was and everything, but in quali, he was less than 500ths away from the pole. Everybody was so tight in qualifying, especially with mixed conditions. I feel like you don't see that all that often because every person that goes around has a different experience because the rain is continuing to fall or stopping or whatever. So
McLaren just showed again how good they are. They just had the fastest car for the last, it's got to be the last 7 weeks, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
They had another great quality performance. Lando getting in their P1, Piastri P2, and I think it was, despite the weather, I think it was an awesome quality session. And I guess because the weather did help with that too. Of course, Max was not happy at all about the rain. Understandably so. I don't think rain and Max go well together at all. But it's just again, Piastri and Lando having the fastest car all weekend. Showing quality, getting it done on Saturday, getting it done on Sunday. So, of course, we get into Sunday a lot more.
I think it's more of a case of this year's Red Bull isn't that great in the rain and in cold conditions.
He's really been great in the rain, but this Red Bull,
usually pretty good.
You don't have a stable, balanced car in the rain. It's only going to make it worse. So I think that's kind of been the case this year. I want to talk about something that hasn't really been covered a lot in the media because I feel like people just kind of brushed it aside and didn't matter. What did you make of the race start? The part where Lando comes over to like kind of close the door on Oscar, because I thought it was a little bit aggressive, too aggressive, and people aren't really talking about it. He did something similar with Max. I don't even know what race that was at this point. It's been so long.
Wasn't the race before or the race before that?
Was
It
it
must have been 1 or
Oxford?
2 races ago, I think.
I don't remember what race it was, but I feel like he's done it a couple times. I feel like it's a little risky given it to me, kind of unnecessary. I don't know what y'all think about it.
Yeah, I personally hate that he did that. I remember seeing it on the unfortunately I missed the start of the race there, but I did eventually see it. I'm like, Lando, can you not do that? Like, you did this, to your point, you did it with Max, it didn't work. And I think doing that, you're not only hurting yourself, you're allowing third place to get a run on you. And that's exactly what happened. Max made it 3 wide going into T1. Of course, he would go wide, and that's a whole other story itself. And Lando would lose a position or two, and Piastri would be set out free. And that would kind of set the story of the race. So I think Lando just has to, to your point, I think he's trying too hard on the start there. I mean, already he's not had the greatest of starts. I feel like his reaction time hasn't been the greatest. So really, I think he just has to focus in on his reaction time. And, after that, just, do what you can do. Don't try and do too much. Don't play hero ball and let Max make it 3 wide going into T1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and he said this in the press conference, which I think he was a little hard on himself, but Lando has a history of doing this, of being very critical of himself. But he was saying, honestly, I didn't lose the race when I gave up the P1 to Oscar. I lost the race when I had that issue, the tangle with Max, going into turn 1, and gave, at the start, I gave Oscar the lead. He ran with it. There was the whole thing with Max and Lando, which I also want to get your opinion on, because personally, I really did feel like, despite Oscar being there wasn't enough room for Max to keep all 4 wheels on the track without hitting somebody. And in my opinion, usually the driver that's getting sandwiched is the one to pull out and let the other 2 go, and Lando would have ended up 3rd, and honestly, he probably would have ended up 2nd anyways in the race. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I totally get what you're saying. And I don't know that it necessarily, for me, the person that's going to go wide has to be the one to back out. And I think the fact that Max did go out, and, if he didn't gain position, I would be like, okay, fine, whatever, do what you got to do. But it's the fact that he did gain time, and he kind of did.
Apex, because I'm pretty sure, I don't know if Jason still has that picture from yesterday.
Yeah.
But
I definitely do.
I'm pretty sure Max was ahead at the apex, so technically he didn't position, which to me was kind of weird. Why they didn't?
I mean,
it was already under invested.
It's like fighter jets going off the track.
It looks like he's ahead, but if you put it in order of the racing line, you have Oscar, Norris, Max.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
obviously there is some room to left there on the inside, but Oscar doesn't know that Max is on the outside. Max doesn't know Oscar's on the inside.
Yeah,
and it just happens that you get squeezed off the track. Now, whatever penalty they would have gave Max if he wouldn't have changed positions, I don't know, would have been 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Could have he built a 5-second gap to Norris behind? I don't know, but he just decided to give it back and try and fight him later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that probably was a smarter decision given the context that I think he probably would have been given a penalty for that. Yeah. Of course, he was furious, and understandably so, that, Red Bull told him to give the position back, regardless of them saying anything.
Yeah.
Because, I do think they probably would have given a penalty, and I think given how fast the McLarens are and how tight the rate was overall, I just don't think you can risk a 5-10-second penalty in that situation, especially given the speed of the other cars there. So, all in all, it worked out.
I loved the radio message too, because Max was like, well, if this is how the stewards are telling us to race, that's how I'll be racing from now on. Now Now that I know that you can push a driver off the track as long as you have someone on the inside and it won't matter, they're the one that's gonna get the penalty. I'm gonna do that every race now. Like, what are you talking about? And
Max has always raced that way.
it's great. I love it.
Like, check out Brazil. Brazil, a 21. Like, I had this image ready because I had to look it up. Like look at that racing line from Max. What a line. He's just optimizing.
The P in Pirelli. The P line.
He's like, I got it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh
That's
my
where the
gosh.
grip is, right? The Pirelli logo is on track. That's where they hide all the grip. They don't put it on the track.
Yeah, they hide it in their logo. They're big brain about
it,
I
guess. Yeah, the Pirelli rubber, right? That's where it goes.
Yep. Yeah, man, Max is such a diva. It's wild.
Yeah, Max's radios the whole time, like the whole race, were just comical. I think I have some of them saved because they were hilarious. Like,
Definition of a 50-year-old couple.
He complained that, after the undercut at the end, they were he was told to, be gentle on the tires at the beginning and then he'd have more pace. And GP goes, well, that was a gentle introduction. He goes, no, mate, don't give me that shit. You guys gave me this fucking strategy, okay? I'm trying to rescue what's left of it, so fuck off. Like, GP and Max's relationship, and again, part of my French are listeners who don't like that kind of language, but, like, their relationship is my favorite. I don't have any of it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, after having listened to another podcast about it, I was kind of like, oh, well, I guess this is kind of normal for them. I was kind of on the more side before that like Max was just pissed. And I think he was to an extent, but at the same time, I think that's just their relationship at the end of the day. I think they're just poking each other. I mean, it's so funny. And I think it's good for Max because imagine they had like a software engineer or an engineer who, I don't know, say like they had McLaren's engineer with Max. Like, that would be utter chaos. Like,
yeah.
If Max does go anywhere, him and his engineer GP is going to be packaged. Yeah.
It has to.
They got to go together. They had that relationship where he could flip out over the radio and GP can calm him down.
Yeah.
One person who was freaking out over Max's sleep schedule was Crofty.
Oh my
God. He was just tearing into Max about staying up sim racing. And Ted Kravitz, he was like, wait a second. Last time Max did this, he won the Grand Prix in Imola.
Yeah.
He was just tearing into him about his sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Max is cranky from missing out on some sleep. It's like,
that made me
you got
so
your 8 hours?
It made me so frustrated because for the start of what was, up until I want to say 2021. So when I started watching F1 back in 2019, so 2019, all of 2020, I had no issues with anybody on commentary. I thought they were very, very fair. But then 2021, that big battle between Max and Lewis, it turned into a lot of British bias against Max. So no matter what he does, he's always being criticized by the British media, by the commentators. And it was no different today. It actually made me so mad. We were texting the whole race. And I was like, if he doesn't shut up, like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And what makes me mad is conferences where last time he did 24 hours, I want to say it was during Imola, Max, Lando was like, oh, I was also up until like 2 or 3 a.m. watching football and MMA and whatnot. And so it was like, all the drivers are young. They're young guys. Like, for the most part, you have your Lewises and your Fernandos and stuff. But honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with his performance today. And I don't think it had anything to do with his attitude. I think he's just frustrated. And spoke about it after the race.
Max is just...
Yeah, he was like, honestly, for anyone who doesn't think that's like, who's not able to be vocal, like, I feel for anyone who's not able to be vocal over the radio, because that's kind of what it's for. Like, everybody needs to vent, and there's no apology needed from either side, from me or from GP. We know how it is. We've been racing together for so long. So
keeping it real in the radio, man.
Before we get into the McLaren radio, I want to discuss the move that Max did. He was just so angry and really sent it on Lewis there.
Yeah, he went a little crazy on that one.
Do you use a racing incident, or do you think that should have been a penalty?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's probably a racing incident, but knowing how the FIA rules things, I think that definitely would have been a penalty. just given again how FA rules things and stuff like that. I think, yeah, and I guess that's a good point too. You have to kind of rule in intention there.
I like that Lewis said it was a racing incident. Like he
Yeah.
knew right away. If there's anybody to blame for that, they're investigating. It had to be Max. Obviously, there's no rule of making a braking mistake or making a super like bad braking move where you lock up the tires. But there is a rule against moving under braking. Max chose his line. It was straight up the inside, sending it past turn one. But Lewis, it almost looked like maybe did he turn in a little there, but definitely deemed it wasn't. And racing incident, obviously.
Yeah.
So and nothing crazy there. Max obviously was never happy about whatever happened there, and he was making mistakes the whole time fighting Lewis. He ran wide a couple times. He just couldn't get past him. Finally, he was fed up and tried to send it. And obviously, it was just like Perez. Remind me of Perez, Mexico last year, right? Just sent it up the inside, clipped the tire, got launched in the air, somehow not damaged.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I think part of the reason too is you have to look at. I think this is maybe. Sorry about that. This is finally a time where we're seeing Max maybe having to feel like, okay, I don't have the car. Like it's starting to actually set in that he doesn't have the car. To really compete with like the McLaren at least, and then he's like, "Whoa, shoot! Now Mercedes are getting fast. I really have to do something now." And I think he's taking it more upon himself, and I think that driving style is starting to come through more and more. And I think that's something that maybe wasn't as apparent just because he had the car and he didn't have to be that aggressive driver. But now it's like he has to be that aggressive driver to even have a chance. So
I think
it's unfortunate, and we'll see how it continues.
I think for sure the pressure is on now because, and we've talked about it so many times, is like not only is he not having the best car anymore, I'd argue he has the third fastest car this weekend. He may have even had the fourth fastest car, because ultimately he was only overtake Charles, only able to fight with Lewis because of the tire deficit. Because if they were on the same tire, if they had pitted at the same time, I honestly don't think that he would have been able to fight him. My thing is, honestly, I mentioned it there when I read off Max's radio. They put him in that position. They let themselves get undercut twice. The first time Max, even in interviews, he was like, the first time, I get it, it happens. But doing it twice, like being undercut a second time, we know how important track position proved to be throughout the race. He even said it's quite impressive how we left ourselves out, how we let ourselves get undercut and just completely fricked my race again. Like, Red Bull's not one to make strategy mistakes, but this race, for sure, they made mistakes. And that left Max in that position where he's again fighting just him against, the two strong McLarens and Lewis and Charles. So, he was going to be extra aggressive. I think he was a little too aggressive, in my opinion. Even as a Max fan, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think the FIA, they're not supposed to, but they definitely took into account the fact that neither of their races were ruined. They were both able to continue, and there was no damage. So I think that's kind of some.
And I think the thing too with your strategy point there, this is not the first time that we've seen Red Bull do this either this season. And I think maybe in defense of them this race, I remember what race was it? Where Max actually I don't think he got the win, but or maybe he did. Where they overcut and it ended up working out for him. I'm trying to remember what race that was. But yeah, I thought that was kind of their strategy this race too. I think the first time, they were trying to pit there and they're trying to get another overcut, I think. And again, not a smart decision in this scenario, but I think at least to their credit, they tried to stick it out the second time, doing it again. But it's just should have done undercuts as simple as that.
Not having Perez there to battle is detrimental. Like Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, even if you pit your lead car, and then like if I'm Mercedes, I'm pitting Lewis and George is behind, and I'm battling. Let's say I'm Lewis battling Charles for the win, which won't happen this year. But I'm Lewis battling Charles for the win, and I go and pit. Sainz is like another pit stop behind me. Now I have to deal stuck behind Sainz.
Yeah.
Red Bull doesn't have the advantage without Perez there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
also there's a point to be made about, going from strategy calls where you have the fastest car to strategy calls when you don't have the fastest car, because it's a completely different story when you have to think about, am I even going to be able to be fast enough, even with I think it was 9-lap tire delta, am I going to be fast enough to overtake this car? Because at this point, they're not. They're not fast enough. Without, like I said, without that tire delta, it would have been impossible for Max to overtake Charles and ultimately Lewis, and that's why he was fighting so difficult, and that's why I think the strategy mistakes that have been made a little bit recently are more apparent, because they're not as fast, and so it's not like they can make these. Maybe they didn't make the perfect call, but did maybe a lap too late or whatever. But Max is able to fight it back because he's making that difference. But now he can't. There's only so much you can do with the car you have, and at this point, Formula One is what 80% car, 70% car, 30% driver, something like that. So, they make the difference, but ultimately the car is just as important. So,
Absolutely.
let's talk about Jason's hat there.
Ooh.
McLaren basically had a hostage negotiation over team radio. And I want to hear your thoughts about
did.
it.
My golly.
McLaren fan probably has some big opinions.
Oh yeah. Well, so I was watching earlier, and I love the way they put it. They called it we're not in radio blackmail. That's basically what was going on there.
Guilt tripping him.
Exactly. And it's all because of McLaren's stupid strategy. All they had to do was put Piastri in an undercut situation and they would have been fine. I get they were trying to protect from Lewis, but the problem is here, they're trying to be too safe. And I think we've talked about before where they don't want Lando or Piastri to have any sort of battles or any sort of issues.
Yeah.
And they're compensating too much for that. They're trying to put Lando in the undercut to save from Lewis taking the spot, or I guess even Max contending for the spot. But that puts Lando in a better spot, gets some track positions, gets them out in P1, and then it just goes all downhill from there. The strategy team is just like, oh well, okay, yeah, we put you in there to keep you away for Lewis. They told Piastri later on that don't worry about Lando. This is all part of the plan. And that's where everything just went downhill. It's as soon as they put Lando in that undercut situation, they really screw themselves up that way. That puts Lando in a better spot to win. And I think
you're a racing driver and you're being put ahead inadvertently by your team strategy. You're going to want to stay ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they should have I think at that point they should have just sent it and just let Lando win that race, because they should have had looked at themselves and been like, okay, we screwed up Piastri. I know this was kind of your race, but we kind of messed up strategy there, and it is what it is. And I think this is also a case of as well, and I was kind of at this point as well, that McLaren are trying to be the good guys. They're trying to be the guys that do everything right. And I think they have to learn that you can't always be the good guy. There's always going to have to be a bad guy in Formula One.
They're already the bad guys of IndyCar, like I've said. They've swapped drivers about 5 times this season, and mostly because they just felt like it. I felt like they're way too indirect. Like it should have been a team order from the start.
Yeah.
And what I wish would have happened was the second Lando came out of the pits, gave back the spot. All right, great. You got Piastri 1, Lando 2, fight to the end.
Yeah.
That's how we wanted it.
Yeah.
But it was slowly, they first started trying to ease him in, say, oh, save tires. Oh, you're using too much tires. Trying to almost coax it out of him. And he's like, no, I'm fine. And then they just kept ramping it up. It got to the point where he was like you say, negotiating. Remember our team meetings. You need a team to win a championship. Remember what we said in Sunday meetings. It sounds like they already had a plan in place, and Norris really didn't want to follow it. But it's still, it felt like a mistake almost to pit Norris on the preferential strategy.
Yeah.
and then have a situation and not just tell them directly swap places. It wasn't until they're like, you need to swap places now, that he actually did it. And it's ridiculous. They definitely have somewhere in a contract like, oh, if you don't follow a team's orders, then you can't race with us. And they waited forever to do that. They're hoping to will it out of him. Like I said, they're racing driver. You put them ahead, they're gonna want to stay ahead.
I agree. I honestly think this is just, for me, another knock at McLaren being so indecisive. We saw it back in I want to say it was Austria, where they were asking Lando, do you want like mediums to cover off Verstappen? You want hards to cover off Lewis? What do you want to do? But in the cockpit, you can't be thinking about what tire you're going to go on. You can show a preference, but honestly, you can't. McLaren as a team shouldn't be asking their drivers that, and we see it a lot with Ferrari as well. They need to be able to. I don't think the whole race, all year, I've ever heard Red Bull ask Max what tires he wants. They've asked what would be your preference for tires, any adjustment to the front wing, how many clicks or whatever, but never do they ask him the strategy. They can ask him about maybe a tire, do you want this tire, whatever, but they're not putting him in the position to make the strategy. They're making the strategy calls. And McLaren has done that time and time again, and they kind of did it again because they were indecisive. They decided to, like you said, be safe and pit Lando to cover Lewis. But then they waited a while, pitted Oscar. He comes out ahead, and like you said, they're kind of coaxing him out of him. They're not giving team orders. And honestly, it should have gone down the way you said. It should have gone down. They pitted. If they really wanted to pit Lando first, you pit Lando first. You pit Oscar. You invert them, and then you let them fight, free to fight. But the way they were kind of coaxing out of Lando, it made him give the pace back only on, I think it was like lap 68 or 69 of 70.
Yeah, a couple laps to go.
You don't have time to fight. So,
but I wonder what their deal was with Lando and Piastri. Like, is it who leads into turn one? Lando is ahead in the championship. He got pole position. You would think that he would get the preference on strategy. Maybe the deal was that team strategy cannot invert drivers. But it's because they don't have a team number one driver, which we saw, can lead to disastrous results sometimes. Thankfully at Ferrari and Mercedes, it has been relatively okay the past couple of years. But this is new territory for McLaren that they haven't been in over a decade at this point.
Well, the thing is too, if you're Lando, is that something? If you're Lando and you're learning how to win, your car's really good, you get pole almost every week. Are you looking at this like? And Jason, I'm glad you brought that up, because if Lando, if it's true that they truly don't have a number one driver, I'm sitting there as Lando is like, wait, what? I'm not what? Guys have been here forever. I'm not year one. And then you're kind of just like, well, I don't want this anymore. I'm just sitting here. I want to be the number one driver. I don't want to be this. As much as he loves Oscar, I don't think he wants to sit there and be, thing two next to Oscar Piastri. He doesn't want to be sitting there.
100%.
I don't think he is. I think he'll always be at least equal, if not number one. There's got to be somewhere where they say, I think Lando's going to take the lead this year over Piastri, and eventually he's going to become the number one driver. He's going to be far enough ahead in the championship. I really think he could fight for this driver's championship based on where we're looking at the development race right now, where McLaren has caught up and most tracks even surpassed Red Bull, even over a race distance, if not just in qualifying. So he still has a shot. I don't see him, and the next step would be leaving the team. Where else would he go? He wouldn't want to leave.
Well,
that's the other thing too.
Team. That's his team, McLaren.
100%. I think it's important to mention the champion side of things, because it almost felt like by pitting Lando first, they were favoring him because of the championship, and I wouldn't have faulted them for that. Even if it did, that's another knock on Oscar. I mean, Oscar's had chances to win a couple times this year, and he's been kind of the scapegoat where they'll give priority to Lando because of the championship, because he's ahead, whatever. And Oscar kind of gets left hanging. So it would have been another instance where that happened. I'm sure they didn't want to do that again to Oscar, but you gotta either decide, and I think I've said this before, you gotta decide to either be fair, between your two drivers, or you got to decide that the priority is going to be the championship and follow it there. Because either way, they're going to get a 1-2. The question is, you want to bring even more of an advantage to Lando in the drivers' championship, especially with Max ending up like 5th, could have been 4th.
Could have been out.
Bring home, he's not going to bring home as many points, so you're gonna chip away slowly at that gap. But then I don't know. It was like they couldn't make up their minds if they wanted to be fair or if they wanted to provide, help the championship. And so they boxed Lando. It's like, okay, we're gonna play a championship game, and then it's like invert with Oscar. It's like, no, I'm gonna be fair. And Oscar wasn't catching him. I mean, Lando pulled out 5 seconds at some point, and so dropping a 5-second gap so that your teammate can overtake you for the win, it couldn't have been easy for him.
No.
So,
well, the thing is too, I'm glad you brought that up as well. I know we talked about it. This absolutely ruined Piastri's win, and it wasn't Lando's fault. At least I don't think it was. I think this was a classic. I think this was McLaren's strategy's fault. I think again, if they, I mean, of course, I would have liked. I guess we'll have to know what McLaren's real strategy was. There was a mistake to let Lando in there with the undercut strategy, or was that intentional and they were trying to get championship points, and then they're like, well, okay, we do got help out Piastri there. But yeah, I think Lando did what he did. He's going to be a race car driver. He's going to go out there and win the race.
Yeah.
And, with the whole fiasco with the radio thing, trying to get him to... I think that's the other thing, too. I think with the radio, they were trying to cover up their mistake. I think they're trying to, trying to ease into it. But
they were
then...
avoid being the assholes of saying... your teammate, right? They were trying to kind of get him to do it on his own, and it would have been honestly, I know I can see from Lando's side why he wouldn't do it, but from the other side, if you're thinking, well, they're not going to be, they're not going to tell you to invert, but invert with your teammate, make it fair and whatnot. But as a driver, like, how do you do that? It's like
I don't think you can,
right? Team order, or you're not going to do it. I get his side of it. My thing, I love the whole thing where I think it was like lap maybe 65 or something like that, right? Closer to the end, they're coaxing him for a while. You never hear Lando say anything back, and then they're like, Lando, radio check, because he wasn't saying anything back. They were like, are he even hearing us at this point?
Yeah. Well, I think you look at I don't know if you guys can, but I can't name a single other driver on the grid that would have let Piastri through. I mean, the only one that would come close, maybe, I don't know, Alex Albon, maybe. Like, I can't see Lewis doing it. You can see Charles doing it.
See Charles and Carlos doing it.
Yeah, but I could see that.
If it was like, for example, Carlos is in the lead and he'd give up the win to Charles for championship purposes. But other than that, it's like if they came on the radio, like, think of the championship, you're still going to get the 1-2, maybe he would do it. But like you said, I don't really see many people that would give the win. Like, I'm sure. And there's also on the other hand of that, there's also most teams I don't think would even ask that of their driver if they were in position to win and they undercut their own driver. That's their mistake. They're not going to make the driver pay for it, I think.
Yeah.
I think teams wouldn't do that.
Yeah, so. I think that's the thing too. Like, the fact, again, I think you have to give props even more to Lando, the fact that he did it. But the thing is, I think if you're Oscar Piastri and they're sitting there like, wait, this is not how I wanted this to go. I didn't want to be given the win. I don't think anyone wants to be given a win. I think everyone wants to fight for it. Unless it's like a crash or something like that. And even then it's like, okay, a win's a win. But yeah, that's the thing too. It's like, and I think this as well, and I hope it doesn't happen, but you look at it from a Lando perspective, especially if he is on his way to becoming a number one driver, it's like, you're going to have this feather in your cap now where it's like, well, okay, you let someone else win when you could have won. You know what I mean? If you're Max Verstappen and this happened, everyone would be like, what?
Yeah.
But it's more of a team gameplay. Both drivers like Verstappen and Vettel have been in instances where they've been asked to let the number 2 driver through due to strategy, and they haven't done it. Seb in Malaysia wouldn't let Mark Webber win. And I think in Brazil, it was Verstappen didn't let Perez win, even when they were both asked by their own team.
They were like 6th or 7th too. It wasn't even like they were fighting for a podium.
It was not. In both cases, Norris let him through. It sounds like their plan right now is team strategy should never affect the driver order, and they'll invert it if possible. So team strategy doesn't affect it. But eventually they're going to have to change that to team strategy prioritizes the championship leader.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to make a quick note about Lewis's 200th, because it was his 200th podium. I think one of the interviewers asked him where he keeps all of the trophies, and he said he rents a storage unit. And at this point, he should
crazy.
He should just like buy a stake in the company, because he probably has like so many, like a couple storage units at this point, so many trophies. So just a little shout out. I know my grandma would kill me if I didn't mention Lewis's 200th, because I think he drove a spectacular race, and he's been driving really well. Making mistakes where George doesn't, and we give a lot of props to George, especially last year, at the beginning of this year. He's driving really, really well, and it was hard not to see him get on the podium. But then he makes these little mistakes, and the team has made some mistakes. He's had some car issues and stuff, and Lewis just hasn't. So props to him on that.
Yep. Did y'all see that picture actually of where Lewis was eating dinner with everyone else who had 200 podiums? Did y'all see that picture?
Yeah.
That
was great. That was great. But actually, also with the Lewis thing, especially in the cooldown room, Maj was trying to be the mediator in this situation. It's so funny.
He's trying to be nice, being like, "Oh, your car is fast," and Norris already riled up. It's like, "Oh, but you had a fast car," and he's like taking it back, like, "Oh no, I didn't mean it that way."
Yeah.
And Norris definitely, I don't even think that's just his personality. I think he's
he was
baffled by what just happened.
Yeah. I think Piastri and Norris were both that way. I think, again, McLaren messed up strategy, and I love this. McLaren somehow got a 1-2 and messed it up. It's crazy.
Yeah.
They got a 1-2, they got a winning driver, and it's not going to feel that way.
I also love how, I think you, Steven, you were the one that catch this. They sent the engineer up there, like the strategy.
Oh, yeah. Jason was saying that. Yeah. Yep.
So I know they showed it during the race. Mr. Singh, he was the strategy engineer. And every week they sent up a team representative for the winning team. So they sent the strategy engineer to take the winner's trophy for some reason. And Norris, after they went for the champagne, he didn't even spray down Oscar. He ran right over to Mr. Singh and just sprayed him down. And getting sprayed with champagne, from what I hear, is horrible experience, because you get all sticky. It gets in your eyes burn. You're completely soaked. And it's champagne, so you get... so it's all terrible. I thought that was pretty funny. A targeted attack with champagne.
Yeah.
Because I think you would expect, like, a 1-2 Oscar's first win. You expect someone, not to say that strategy engineer isn't important, but someone more high up in the team, someone like Zach Brown. But interesting to mention, I know we talked about IndyCar towards the beginning of the pod. Zach Brown wasn't there. Do you think anything would have played out differently had he been there?
At first I thought so, but now I'm probably going to say no, especially after I saw the video of what Zach Brown said there after the race. I think he probably would just let it go. Let it be a thing.
He's more of the business and organizational guy. He would talk to drivers for sure, but he's not the strategy engineer. He's dealing with his own driver drama. That's probably why I was in IndyCar this week in Canada, because they had a ton of driver drama with injured drivers, old drivers coming back, new contracts, old contracts. They had a lot of drama. So he went over there this week to smooth things over. And the second he leaves, the other team blows up with driver drama. So it looks like he's going to be heading back to England pretty soon.
Yeah, we're going to need 2 Zach Browns at this point.
I know.
He needs doppelganger. Anyway, let's do podium predictions for Spa.
Yep. So I think I know we talked about it before. I think I am going to go with what should have been this race. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to take Lewis out of it. I'm going to take Lewis out of it just because Mercedes not having the straight line speed. I'm going to go Lando 1, Piastri 2. Probably just go Max 3. Call it a day.
Jason?
Because my McLaren thinking cap has brainwashed me, it's definitely going to be Norris, Verstappen, Piastri, especially because Hamilton has said that the McLarens and Red Bulls are just way too fast on the straights. He couldn't keep up. If Max would have made contact, I'm for sure Max would have been on the podium. So I think McLaren's gonna fight for the win here. Max definitely second, fighting for win. And to round it out, Piastri in third.
I like it. I'm so hesitant right now. I have this feeling, and it's not a good one, that
Uh-oh.
we're going to have some type of altercation between Max and Lando again on track.
Oh, no.
Norris is technically Belgium.
Yeah, well,
His
so
mom is Belgium, right?
Yeah,
Max,
yeah.
doesn't Max also have Belgium descent?
And it's right next to, it's right by the Netherlands too. So
Yeah,
a lot of
it's a big
the
home
Max
track
army
for
shows
them.
up, the Orange Army.
I think it's a more traditional track, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue for Red Bull. I think there's going to be something similar to kind of what happened to turn 1, where it's like overtake off the track or something like that.
Yeah.
God, this is such a Delulu Max fan pick. I think I'm going to go Max P1, Lando P2,
Wow.
Oscar P3. It's
Okay.
crazy how in 3-4 weeks time you can go from being delusional thinking Max is going to win a race to being delusional Max isn't. Like, you go from there's no way he's not going to win to there's no way he is going to win.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
All right,
That's F1.
quote of the day.
Oh man, you got so many to choose from.
Listen, this one is from it's not from this year, but it is from this track.
Okay.
It's going to be a tough one, I'll give you that. Not bad with half a car.
Sebastian Vettel.
No.
Christian, it is a driver, right?
I'm pretty sure, yeah, he was a driver.
Pretty sure it makes me
sure.
hesitant.
It's in a driver engineer conversation. So
Gotcha. Okay.
so I think they both said it at some point.
It's
Gotcha.
Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
No.
He was
2021.
okay a HAAS in 2021. After Valtteri Bottas decided to go bowling, and he had some damage. I think almost everyone on the grid had damage that day. It was
Yeah.
complete.
Except some were emotional, others were physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually, I wanted to bring up, I know we were talking about turn 1. Can you just talk about for a second how crazy T1 is going to be at Spa? Oh my gosh.
When's the last
Especially-
time Norris has won from pole? Like, he always loses the win. I
Yeah.
don't think ever.
That's an interesting stat to bring up too. He has yet to lead after turn 1 from pole.
Yeah. I think again he's just trying to do too much. I think he's trying to play hero ball and win in T1. I think that's honestly what it is. And I think Spa's I feel like it's most encouraged at Spa. You're going into a hairpin T1 basically.
Yeah.
It's like I'm sure we're gonna go with, Lando P1. I mean, I don't know what your guys' opinion would be on it, like what the top 3 starting positions would be. I'd probably say Lando, Piastri, and then probably Max, P3, something like that. I think you're just gonna have another situation of 3 wide here, and it's gonna be crazy.
I think so too. I can't imagine it though. I just don't even want to think about it till next week. With that said, thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back next week. Usually, if not always, Mondays at 11:30 Eastern time. In between now and then, though, don't forget to check out our TikTok and our Instagram at Lights Out Latest for Text Tuesdays, Wag Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, Fun Fact Friday, the occasional man in the streets, and any clips from this pod or predictions if you missed it. Bye, guys.